What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest stars walks into what he thinks is a friendly interview, only to face a blindside attack that exposes the ugly side of daytime television? You're about to witness one of the most explosive moments in talk show history, where Tom Cruise's legendary composure finally cracked under relentless provocation. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment because this story gets more intense with every minute that passes. The atmosphere in the View studio was unusually tense that morning. Tom Cruise had agreed to appear on the show to promote his latest Mission Impossible film, expecting the typical softball questions about stunts and behind-the-scenes stories. What he got instead was something entirely different. As Cruise settled into the guest chair, flashing his trademark smile at the audience, Joy Behar leaned forward with a smirk that should have been his first warning. The other co-hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Sunny Hostin, seemed unusually quiet, almost as if they knew what was coming. "Tom, welcome back to The View," Whoopi began warmly, trying to maintain the show's professional facade. "We're so excited to have you here to talk about your new film." "Thank you for having me," Cruise replied, his energy infectious as always. "I'm thrilled to be here. This movie has been such an incredible journey, and I can't wait to share it with everyone." But before he could continue, Joy Behar interrupted with a tone that cut through the pleasantries like a knife. "Tom, before we get to your little action movie, I think we need to address the elephant in the room, your personal beliefs and how they affect your career choices." The studio fell silent. Even the audience seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere. Cruise's smile faltered for just a moment before he composed himself. "I'm sorry, Joy, but I'm here to talk about the film. My personal beliefs are exactly that. Personal." Joy wasn't backing down. She leaned back in her chair with a satisfied expression, clearly enjoying the discomfort she was creating. "Oh, come on, Tom. You're a public figure. You make millions of dollars because people pay to see you on screen. Don't you think they have a right to know what kind of person they're supporting?" "I think people have a right to be entertained," Cruise responded, his voice still controlled but with a slight edge creeping in. "That's what I've dedicated my career to doing. Bringing stories to life that inspire and entertain audiences around the world." Whoopi tried to intervene, sensing the tension escalating. "Joy, maybe we should focus on the movie first and then—" "No, Whoopi," Joy cut her off sharply. "I think this is exactly what we should be talking about. Tom here has been avoiding real questions for years, hiding behind his publicity machine and carefully crafted interviews." "Well, this isn't one of those interviews." The camera captured Cruise's jaw tightening slightly, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "Joy, with all due respect, I've never hidden from anything. I've been open about my life, my work, and my dedication to my craft. What exactly are you trying to get at here?" Joy's eyes lit up with malicious glee. "What I'm getting at, Tom, is that you use your platform to promote ideas that many people find dangerous and irresponsible. And yet you expect us all to just ignore that and focus on your little stunts and explosions?" "My little stunts?" Cruise repeated, his voice rising slightly. "Those little stunts employ thousands of people. They create jobs for stunt coordinators, special effects teams, camera operators, sound technicians. Those little stunts generate hundreds of millions of dollars that go back into the economy and fund other films, other stories, other dreams." Sarah Haynes shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly wishing she could be anywhere else. Sunny Hostin looked like she wanted to speak, but kept glancing nervously between Joy and Tom. Joy waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please, spare me the economics lesson. We both know that's not what this is about. This is about you using your fame and influence to legitimize fringe beliefs that harm real people." The audience began to murmur, some clearly uncomfortable with the direction the interview was taking. Cruise's publicist, visible in the wings, looked like he was ready to pull his client off the stage at any moment. "Fringe beliefs?" Cruise's voice was no longer just controlled, it was dangerous. "Joy, you're making accusations without any basis. I've never forced my beliefs on anyone. I've never used my platform to hurt people. In fact, I've used it to do the opposite, to bring joy and excitement to millions of fans around the world." "But that's exactly the problem, isn't it?" Joy pressed on, clearly enjoying every moment of Cruise's growing frustration. "You have all this influence, all this power, and you use it irresponsibly. People look up to you, Tom. Young people, impressionable people. And what kind of example are you setting? Whoopi made another attempt to redirect the conversation. Joy, I really think we should. Let her finish, Whoopi, Cruz interrupted, his famous intensity now fully focused on Joy Behar. I want to hear exactly what she's accusing me of. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you invited me here under false pretenses, just so you could ambush me with your personal agenda. The studio was now completely silent except for the low hum of the cameras. Joy's smirk widened. My personal agenda? Tom, my agenda is the truth. Something you seem to have a very complicated relationship with. That was the moment something shifted in Tom Cruise's demeanor. The carefully controlled movie star facade began to crack, and underneath, the real man, the one who had fought for every role, every stunt, every moment of his career, began to emerge. The truth? Cruise repeated slowly, his voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. You want to talk about the truth, Joy? The truth is that I've spent 30 years of my life dedicated to entertaining people. 30 years of 14-hour days, broken bones, physical therapy, and pushing myself to the absolute limit to give audiences something special. And you sit there, in your comfortable chair, making accusations and casting judgment without any understanding of what that means. Joy leaned forward, sensing she had struck a nerve and wanting to push even harder. Oh, I understand perfectly, Tom. I understand that when you have a platform like yours, you have a responsibility, and I think you've failed in that responsibility spectacularly. The other co-hosts were now visibly uncomfortable. Sunny Hostin was shaking her head slightly, and Sarah Haynes looked like she might actually get up and leave. But Joy was just getting started, and Tom Cruise was about to show the world what happens when someone finally pushes him too far. You know what, Joy? Cruise's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Let's talk about responsibility. Let's talk about the responsibility of a journalist, or someone who claims to be one, to do their research before making wild accusations on national television. Joy's smirk faltered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered. I've done my research, Tom. Trust me on that. Have you? Cruise leaned forward, his intensity now fully unleashed. Because if you had, you'd know about the literacy programs I've funded. You'd know about the disaster relief efforts I've contributed to without any publicity. You'd know about the scholarships I've provided for kids who can't afford college. But none of that fits your narrative, does it? The audience was completely captivated now, some leaning forward in their seats. This wasn't the typical View interview anyone was expecting. Whoopi made one more attempt to regain control. Tom, Joy, let's just take a step back here and... No, Whoopi? Cruise interrupted, never taking his eyes off Joy. She wanted to talk about truth and responsibility. So let's do that. Joy, when was the last time you actually researched a story instead of just repeating talking points? When was the last time you actually tried to understand someone's position before attacking them? Joy's face was beginning to redden, her comfortable superiority being challenged in a way she clearly wasn't prepared for. Don't you dare question my journalistic integrity, Tom. I've been doing this longer than you've been making movies. Longer, maybe. Cruise shot back. Better? That's debatable. Because a real journalist would have asked me about my charitable work. A real journalist would have asked me about the safety protocols we develop for stunts that protect other actors. A real journalist would have asked me about the mentoring programs I run for young actors. But you didn't ask about any of that, did you? Sarah Haynes finally found her voice, trying desperately to lighten the mood. Tom? Maybe we could talk about some of those programs now? That sounds really interesting. But Joy wasn't about to let the conversation shift away from her attack. Those are just publicity stunts, Tom. Everyone in Hollywood does charity work for the cameras. What I'm talking about is the real influence you have, the beliefs you promote, that actually affect people's lives. The gloves were completely off now. Cruise stood up from his chair, his full intensity bearing down on Joy Behar. Publicity stunts. You think the families who kept their homes because of disaster relief I funded care whether it was a publicity stunt? You think the kids who got college educations because of scholarships I provided care about your cynical interpretation of my motives? Tom, please sit down, Whoopi pleaded, clearly worried about where this was heading. No, I'm not going to sit down, Cruise replied, his voice rising. I came here in good faith to talk about a movie that employed hundreds of people, that tells a story people want to see, that brings a little excitement into their lives. And instead, I get ambushed by someone who's decided to make me her personal crusade. Joy stood up as well, not willing to be physically intimidated. This isn't a crusade, Tom. This is accountability, something celebrities like you rarely face. Accountability? Cruz laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about accountability? What about your accountability, Joy? What about the responsibility you have to your audience to present facts instead of your personal biases? What about your responsibility to treat guests with basic respect? The tension in the studio was so thick it was almost suffocating. The camera operators were having trouble keeping both combatants in frame as they faced off across the small space between the couches. I don't owe you respect just because you're famous, Joy shot back. Respect is earned, and frankly, I don't think you've earned it. That statement landed like a physical blow. Cruz's jaw tightened, and for a moment, everyone in the studio held their breath. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. I haven't earned respect? Joy, I've spent 3 decades earning the respect of audiences around the world. I've earned the respect of directors, cinematographers, stunt coordinators, and fellow actors by never asking them to do something I wouldn't do myself. I've earned the respect of crews by showing up prepared, on time, and ready to work harder than anyone else on set. But you haven't earned mine, Joy interrupted, clearly trying to regain control of the confrontation. And you know what? Cruz continued, building momentum. I don't need your respect. What I need is for you to stop hiding behind this fake journalist persona and admit what this really island. This is you trying to make a name for yourself by attacking someone more successful than you. This is you trying to get ratings by creating drama where none existed. Joy's face was now bright red, her composure completely shattered. How dare you? I've been in this business for decades. I don't need to make a name for myself by attacking washed-up action stars. Washed up? Cruz repeated, and now there was genuine anger in his voice. My last 5 films have grossed over $2 billion worldwide. I do my own stunts at 50-plus years old. I work with the best directors in the business who specifically seek me out for their projects. If that's washed up, Joy, then I'd hate to see what you consider success. Sunny Hostin finally spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. Maybe we should all just take a breath here and... No. Joy cut her off sharply. I'm not going to take a breath. I'm not going to back down just because he's raising his voice and trying to intimidate me. Intimidate you? Cruz asked incredulously. Joy, you started this confrontation. You invited me here under the pretense of promoting my film and then immediately launched into a personal attack. And now you want to play the victim because I'm defending myself? The audience was completely silent now, transfixed by the raw emotion playing out in front of them. This wasn't scripted daytime television anymore. This was real conflict between 2 strong personalities, and everyone could feel it. I'm not playing anything, Joy retorted. I'm doing my job, which is asking the tough questions that other interviewers are too scared to ask. Tough questions? Cruz shook his head in disbelief. Joy, you haven't asked me a single question about anything substantive. You've made accusations, you've cast aspersions, and you've insulted my character. But you haven't asked me one real question. Fine, Joy said, her voice dripping with contempt. Here's a question for you, Tom. How do you justify using your platform to promote beliefs that mental health professionals consider harmful? The question hung in the air like a live grenade. Cruz's eyes narrowed, and everyone in the studio could see that Joy had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. There it is, Cruz said quietly. There's the real ambush. You couldn't just attack my career or my character. You had to go after my personal beliefs, my right to think for myself, my right to question established orthodoxies. When those orthodoxies help people and your questioning hurts them, yes, I'm going to challenge that, Joy replied defiantly. And who made you the arbiter of what helps and what hurts people? Cruz demanded. Who gave you the authority to decide which beliefs are acceptable and which aren't? Who put you in charge of other people's spiritual and philosophical choices? The confrontation was reaching a fever pitch, and it was clear that something had to give. The other co-hosts looked helpless, the audience was on the edge of their seats, and the cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of what was becoming television history. "You want to know who put me in charge?" Joy's voice was now shrill, her professional mask completely gone. "The people who watch this show, who trust me to ask the questions they want answered. The people who are tired of celebrities getting softball treatment while they promote dangerous ideas." That was the moment Tom Cruise finally erupted. His composure, legendary in Hollywood for its unshakable nature, completely shattered. His voice boomed across the studio with an intensity that made everyone jump. "Dangerous ideas?" he shouted, his face flushed with anger. "You want to talk about dangerous ideas, Joy? Let's talk about the dangerous idea that a talk show host gets to decide what people should think. Let's talk about the dangerous idea that disagreeing with mainstream opinion makes someone a threat to society." The studio was dead silent except for the sound of Cruise's voice echoing off the walls. Joy actually took a step back, clearly not prepared for this level of raw fury. "Let's talk about the dangerous idea," Cruise continued, his voice still raised but now controlled, precise, like a weapon being aimed. "That someone who's never studied philosophy, never researched alternative approaches to mental health, never actually investigated the subjects she claims to be an expert on, gets to sit in judgment of other people's deeply held beliefs." Joy tried to regain her footing. "Tom, you're missing the point. I'm not judging your right to believe whatever you want. I'm questioning your right to influence others with those beliefs." "My right to influence others?" Cruise's voice cracked like thunder. "Joy, what exactly do you think you're doing right now? You're sitting on national television trying to influence millions of viewers to think badly of me based on your personal prejudices. You're using your platform to attack someone's character without evidence, without context, without fairness, and you have the audacity to question my influence?" Whoopi was frantically gesturing to the producers off camera, clearly desperate to find a way to end this confrontation before it got even more out of control. But it was too late. This was Tom Cruise unleashed, and he wasn't finished. "You want to talk about harmful influence?" Cruise pressed on, his intensity never wavering. "What about the influence of cynicism? What about the influence of assuming the worst about people? What about the influence of teaching audiences that success should be punished, that achievement should be torn down, that anyone who thinks differently should be publicly humiliated?" Joy was visibly shaken now, but she tried one more attack. "I'm not trying to humiliate anyone. I'm trying to hold you accountable." "Accountable for what?" Cruise exploded again, and this time even Whoopi flinched. "For working hard? For dedicating my life to entertaining people? For questioning authority? For thinking for myself? For refusing to let people like you tell me what I'm allowed to believe?" The audience was completely mesmerized. Several people had their phones out, clearly recording what they knew was an unprecedented moment in television history. The other co-hosts looked like they wanted to disappear entirely. "You know what the real tragedy is here, Joy?" Cruise's voice dropped to that dangerous whisper again, somehow more menacing than his shouts. "You had a chance to have a real conversation with someone who's lived an extraordinary life. You could have asked me about working with the greatest directors of our time. You could have asked me about the evolution of action filmmaking. You could have asked me about what it's like to perform stunts that push the boundaries of what's possible on screen." He paused, letting that sink in before continuing. "You could have asked me about my journey as an actor, about the roles that challenged me, about the characters that changed me. You could have asked me about the technical innovations we develop for each film, about the safety protocols that protect other performers, about the collaborative process of making movies." Joy opened her mouth to speak, but Cruise wasn't done. "Instead," he continued, his voice building again, "you chose to ambush me. You chose to attack my personal beliefs. You chose to turn what should have been a celebration of cinema into a character assassination. And for what? For ratings? For your own ego? For the cheap thrill of trying to tear down someone more successful than you?" "That's not," Joy started, but Cruise cut her off with a gesture that was so commanding, so filled with authority, that she actually stopped talking. "No, Joy. You've had your turn to talk. You've had your turn to attack. Now it's my turn to respond, and you're going to listen." His voice was steel wrapped in silk, controlled fury that was somehow more powerful than his earlier explosions. I've spent my entire career trying to bring joy to people's lives. I've risked my life doing stunts so that audiences can experience something extraordinary. I've worked with thousands of talented people to create stories that inspire, that entertain, that give people a break from their everyday problems. That's my influence, Joy. That's what I've contributed to the world. The camera caught Joy's face, and for the first time in the interview, she looked genuinely uncomfortable, almost small. What have you contributed? Cruz asked quietly. What have you built? What have you created? What legacy are you leaving behind other than a trail of hurt feelings and damaged reputations? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Joy's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For perhaps the first time in her career, Joy Behar was speechless. You see, Cruz continued, sensing her vulnerability, that's the difference between us. I build things. I create things. I bring people together to make something larger than any of us individually. You tear things down. You divide people. You spread negativity and cynicism and call it journalism. Sonny Hostin tried to speak up. Tom, I think maybe we're getting a little off track here. No, Sonny, Cruz replied, but his tone toward her was respectful, even gentle. We're exactly on track. Because this is what happens when someone mistakes cynicism for wisdom, when someone confuses destruction with insight, when someone believes that tearing others down elevates themselves. He turned back to Joy, who was now sitting down, clearly defeated. Joy, you started this conversation by questioning my influence, my responsibility to my audience. Well, let me ask you about yours. What kind of influence do you think you've had on this audience today? What kind of example have you set? What kind of message have you sent about how we should treat each other? The silence in the studio was deafening. Joy, for once in her life, had nothing to say. The other co-hosts looked mortified. The audience was transfixed. And Tom Cruise, having said everything he needed to say, straightened his jacket and sat back down with the dignity of someone who had just fought for his honor and won. Now, he said calmly, his voice returning to its normal tone as if nothing had happened. Would anyone like to talk about the movie? Because it's actually quite good, and a lot of very talented people worked very hard to make it. Whoopi, desperate to salvage what remained of the show, jumped on the opportunity. Yes, please, let's talk about the film. Tom, tell us about the stunts in this one. And just like that, Tom Cruise switched back into promotional mode, discussing his latest project with enthusiasm and professionalism while Joy Behar sat in stunned silence, thoroughly and completely defeated by someone who had finally had enough of her attacks. The interview continued for a few more minutes, but everyone knew that the real story had already been told. Tom Cruise had been pushed too far, and he had pushed back with a force and eloquence that left his attacker speechless and exposed her tactics for what they really were. If you want to see more explosive celebrity confrontations like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments, which celebrity do you think would handle a Joy Behar ambush interview the best,